Marcus Thompson had
Steady.
always been the kind of person others
No
looked
one
through
moves.
rather than at. Standing barely 5 feet 6 inches tall with thick glasses and shoulders that seemed permanently hunched from years of carrying heavy books, he appeared more like a librarian than someone who would ever hold a weapon. His childhood in the rough neighborhoods of Detroit had been marked by constant bullying and mockery from peers who saw his quiet nature and academic interests as signs of weakness. The other kids would snicker when Marcus walked by, calling him names like Four Eyes and Bookworm. They would knock his glasses off his face during recess and scatter his carefully organized homework papers across the playground. Marcus never fought back, not because he was afraid, but because his grandmother had taught him that violence was never the answer. She had raised him after his parents died in a car accident when he was 8 years old, and her gentle wisdom was the guiding force in his life. Despite the constant harassment, Marcus excelled in school. His teachers noticed his exceptional focus and attention to detail. While other students struggled to sit still during long lectures, Marcus would absorb every word, taking meticulous notes in his neat handwriting. He particularly loved history and mathematics, finding comfort in the logical patterns and fascinating stories of human achievement and failure. After graduating high school with top honors, Marcus faced a difficult decision. His grandmother's medical bills were mounting, and college seemed financially impossible, despite his academic achievements. The military recruiter who visited his neighborhood painted a picture of opportunity, education benefits, steady pay, and the chance to serve his country. Marcus saw it as his only path forward, even though the idea of military life terrified him. When Marcus announced his intention to enlist, the reaction from his former classmates was swift and brutal. Word spread quickly through their small community, and soon he was facing a crowd of familiar faces outside the local convenience store where he worked part-time. They had gathered not to wish him well, but to express their disbelief and amusement. "You've got to be kidding," laughed Jake Morrison, the same boy who had stuffed Marcus into lockers throughout middle school. "The Army's going to take one look at you and send you home crying to Grandma." Sarah Peters, once the most popular girl in their graduating class, giggled as she looked Marcus up and down. "What are you going to do? Bore the enemy to death with your book reports? They'll probably make you the camp librarian." The crowd grew larger as word spread, and soon nearly 20 people had gathered to witness what they saw as the funniest joke of the year. They took turns making comments about Marcus's physical appearance, his quiet demeanor, and his complete lack of athletic ability. Some pulled out their phones to record the moment, already planning to share the humiliation on social media. "Remember when he passed out during the fitness test in gym class?" called out Tommy Rodriguez. "The drill sergeants are going to eat him alive. He'll be back home within a week. Guaranteed." Marcus stood quietly through the entire ordeal, his face burning with embarrassment but his resolve strengthening with each cruel comment. He thought about his grandmother lying in her hospital bed, about the bills that kept arriving in the mail, and about the promise he had made to himself to build a better life. These people had no idea what drove him or what he was capable of when properly motivated. The harassment continued for several more minutes, with the crowd growing more animated and cruel. They began placing bets on how long Marcus would last in basic training, with the most optimistic estimate being 3 days. Some suggested he would quit before even finishing the first day, overcome by homesickness and the harsh reality of military discipline. As the sun began to set and the crowd finally started to disperse, each person made sure to deliver one final insult or expression of doubt. They walked away laughing and shaking their heads, convinced they had just witnessed someone make the biggest mistake of their life. Marcus watched them go, his jaw set with quiet determination. That night, Marcus sat with his grandmother in her small hospital room, holding her frail hand as she slept. He made a silent promise to himself and to her memory. He would not only survive military training, but he would excel in ways that would shock everyone who had ever doubted him. He had no idea that his journey would lead him to discover talents he never knew he possessed. Talents that would eventually earn him respect in the most elite circles of military service. The next morning, Marcus boarded a bus bound for Fort Benning, Georgia, carrying only a small duffel bag and the weight of everyone's expectations of his failure. He stared out the window as his hometown disappeared behind him, knowing that he was leaving behind not just a place, but an identity that others had forced upon him. Whatever happened next, he would face it with the same quiet determination that had carried him through years of ridicule and hardship. The first weeks of basic training at Fort Benning were exactly as brutal as everyone back home had predicted. But not in the way Marcus had expected. The physical challenges were intense. Early morning runs, endless push-ups, obstacle courses that seemed designed to break both body and spirit. Most recruits struggled with the sudden shock of military discipline, the screaming drill sergeants, and the complete absence of privacy or personal time. But Marcus discovered something unexpected about himself during those grueling early days. While other recruits complained about the rigid schedule and constant oversight, he found comfort in the structure. His years of being methodical and detail-oriented, traits that had made him a target for bullies, suddenly became valuable assets. His bunk was always perfectly made, his equipment meticulously maintained, and his uniform spotless. Drill Sergeant Rodriguez, an intimidating man with arms like tree trunks and a voice that could be heard across the entire base, noticed Marcus immediately. But not for the reasons Marcus had feared. While other recruits fumbled with their gear and forgot instructions, Marcus absorbed everything with laser-like focus. He helped struggling teammates without being asked, shared his detailed notes from training sessions, and never complained about the hardships. The real surprise came during weapons training. Marcus had never held a gun before entering the military, let alone fired one. His grandmother had been strictly opposed to violence of any kind, and guns were completely foreign to his urban upbringing. When Sergeant Martinez handed him his first M16 rifle, Marcus's hands shook slightly as he examined the unfamiliar weight and mechanics of the weapon. "Don't worry, soldier," Sergeant Martinez said with a knowing smile. "Most city boys like you have never seen anything bigger than a water gun. Just try not to hurt yourself." The other recruits chuckled, and Marcus could see some of them already composing stories in their minds about how the quiet kid from Detroit would probably shoot himself in the foot. They gathered around the firing range with barely concealed amusement, expecting to witness another moment of Marcus's inevitable failure. Sergeant Martinez spent 30 minutes explaining the basics of rifle handling, safety protocols, and aiming techniques. Marcus listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about sight alignment and breathing control, while other recruits grew impatient and eager to start shooting. When it was finally time for live fire exercises, Marcus was the last recruit to step up to the firing line. He adjusted his stance according to the instructions, checked his grip multiple times, and took several deep breaths to calm his racing heart. The target stood 100 yards away, marked with concentric circles that seemed impossibly small from his position. Around him, other recruits had already begun firing with mixed results, some hitting the target occasionally, others missing completely. Marcus raised his rifle, aligned the sights just as he had been taught, and slowly squeezed the trigger. The sharp crack of the gunshot echoed across the range, and everyone looked toward his target to see the result. A perfect bullseye. The shot had struck dead center of the target with surgical precision. Sergeant Martinez lowered his binoculars and walked over to check Marcus's target more closely. "Lucky shot, Thompson. Let's see if you can do it again." Marcus fired again. Another perfect bullseye, this one even closer to the exact center than the first. The chatter among the other recruits died down as they realized what they were witnessing. Marcus continued firing, and with each shot, the pattern of holes in his target formed an impossibly tight group right in the center ring. "What the hell?" muttered Jackson, one of the more athletic recruits who had been struggling to hit the target at all. "How is he doing that? How is he doing that?" By the time Marcus had emptied his first magazine, he had achieved something that impressed even the seasoned drill sergeants. 10 shots, 10 perfect hits, all clustered within a space smaller than a silver dollar. Sergeant Martinez called for a ceasefire and walked the entire group over to examine Marcus's target. "In 15 years of training recruits," Sergeant Martinez announced to the stunned group, "I have never seen a first-time shooter achieve this level of accuracy. Thompson just shot a group that would make our best snipers jealous." Word of Marcus's shooting ability spread quickly through the base. During subsequent training sessions, instructors began paying special attention to his progress. They moved him to more challenging distances, 200 yards, then 300 yards, then beyond. Each time, Marcus adapted quickly and maintained his remarkable accuracy. He seemed to have an intuitive understanding of wind correction, elevation adjustments, and the subtle factors that affected long-range precision. Fellow recruits who had initially dismissed Marcus as weak and unsuitable for military service began looking at him with newfound respect and curiosity. They started asking him for advice about their own shooting, and Marcus was happy to share what he had learned. His quiet, analytical approach to marksmanship became the subject of serious study among the training staff. During one memorable session, a visiting colonel observed training exercises and was so impressed by Marcus's performance that he requested a private demonstration. Marcus was asked to attempt shots at targets positioned at increasingly difficult angles and distances. Each challenge was met with calm precision that left experienced officers shaking their heads in amazement. "Son," the colonel said after watching Marcus consistently hit targets at 500 yards, "you have a gift that can't be taught. This kind of natural ability appears maybe once in 1,000 soldiers." As basic training progressed, Marcus continued to excel in marksmanship while also proving himself in other areas. His academic background helped him master military strategy and tactics with ease. His attention to detail made him valuable in equipment maintenance and logistics. Most importantly, his calm demeanor under pressure began earning him the respect of both instructors and fellow recruits. The transformation was remarkable to witness. The same recruits who had initially expected Marcus to wash out were now asking to be assigned to his team during training exercises. They had learned that having Marcus on their side meant having someone who could provide covering fire with deadly accuracy and tactical advice based on careful observation and analysis. By the end of basic training, Marcus had not only survived, but had emerged as one of the top performers in his class. His shooting scores were so exceptional that they attracted attention from specialized military units, always searching for recruits with rare talents. The quiet young man from Detroit, who had been mocked for his weakness, had discovered a strength that would change the entire trajectory of his military career. 6 months after completing basic training, Marcus found himself standing in a conference room at Fort Bragg, facing 3 officers whose presence commanded immediate respect. Colonel Patricia Wells, a sharp-eyed woman with silver hair and numerous commendations on her uniform, sat across from Major Thompson and Captain Rodriguez. These were not ordinary military personnel. They represented the Army's most elite marksmanship unit. The meeting had been arranged after Marcus's training scores reached the attention of higher command. His consistent performance during advanced infantry training had been nothing short of extraordinary. While most soldiers were satisfied with hitting targets at standard combat ranges, Marcus had been experimenting with longer and more challenging shots during his free time, often achieving results that defied explanation. "Private Thompson," Colonel Wells began, her voice measured and professional, "your shooting scores have raised some eyebrows around here. We've been watching your progress. And frankly, we're intrigued. Tell me, did you have any formal training before joining the military?" Marcus shook his head, maintaining proper military posture despite his nervousness. "No, ma'am. I had never fired a weapon before basic training. My grandmother was opposed to guns, so I grew up without any exposure to firearms." Major Thompson leaned forward, studying a file filled with Marcus's training records. "According to these reports, you achieved expert marksman status within your first month of training. Most soldiers take years to reach that level, if they ever do. Your instructors describe your accuracy as unprecedented and almost supernatural." The officers exchanged glances before Colonel Wells continued. "We'd like to offer you an opportunity, Thompson. Our unit specializes in precision shooting and counter-sniper operations. We're always looking for soldiers with exceptional natural ability who can be trained for the most demanding marksmanship roles in the military." Marcus felt his heart racing but kept his expression neutral. "What would that involve?" "Ma'am?" Captain Rodriguez spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the weight of extensive combat experience. "Advanced sniper training, specialized equipment, and missions that require absolute precision under extreme pressure. This isn't standard infantry work, Thompson. We're talking about operations where a single shot can determine the success or failure of entire missions." The next several weeks were a whirlwind of evaluations and assessments. Marcus was tested not just on his shooting ability, but on his mental toughness. decision-making under pressure, and ability to work independently for extended periods. The psychological evaluations were particularly intense, as military psychologists tried to understand the source of his remarkable calm and focus. Dr. Sarah Chen, the unit's staff psychologist, conducted multiple sessions with Marcus to assess his suitability for high-stress operations. "You have an unusual ability to maintain focus under pressure," she observed during one of their conversations. "Most people become anxious when they know they're being evaluated. But your performance actually improves. That's extremely rare." Marcus thought about her comment as he prepared for the final shooting assessment that would determine his acceptance into the elite unit. The test was designed to simulate real-world conditions: multiple targets at varying distances, time pressure, environmental challenges like wind and poor lighting, and the psychological stress of knowing that failure meant returning to standard infantry duties. The shooting range selected for the test was unlike anything Marcus had experienced before. Targets were positioned at distances ranging from 100 to 1,000. 200 yards, some partially concealed behind obstacles, others moving along predetermined paths. He would have just 60 minutes to engage all targets while maintaining the accuracy standards required for sniper operations. A small group of instructors and evaluators gathered to observe the test, including several active snipers who had volunteered to witness what they had heard was an exceptional display of marksmanship. Among them was Sergeant First Class Williams, a legendary sniper with over 200 confirmed kills during multiple combat deployments. "I've been hearing stories about this kid," Williams muttered to his colleague as Marcus prepared his equipment. "Sounds like someone's been exaggerating his abilities. We'll see what he's really made of when the pressure's on." Marcus began the assessment methodically, starting with the closest targets and working his way to the more challenging long-range shots. Each shot was preceded by careful observation of wind conditions, calculation of bullet drop, and adjustment for environmental factors. The observers watched in growing amazement as target after target was struck with precision that exceeded their expectations. At the 800-yard line, Marcus faced a particularly challenging shot. A target partially concealed behind a steel barrier, with only a small portion visible. The wind was gusting unpredictably, and the late afternoon sun was creating difficult lighting conditions. Marcus took several minutes to study the situation, making minute adjustments to his scope and position. When he finally took the shot, the distant target dropped immediately. The evaluators confirmed through binoculars that the bullet had struck within the required scoring ring, despite the numerous obstacles and challenges. Similar successes followed at 1,000 and 1,200 yards, distances where even experienced snipers often struggled to maintain consistent accuracy. Sergeant Williams walked over to examine the targets after the assessment was complete. His expression had changed from skepticism to genuine amazement as he studied the tight groupings and precise hits Marcus had achieved. "Colonel," he called to Wells, "you need to see this. I've never witnessed shooting like this from anyone, let alone someone with 6 months of military experience." The final evaluation scores were unprecedented in the unit's history. Marcus had not only met the requirements for acceptance into the elite marksmanship program, but had exceeded them by margins that seemed almost impossible. Colonel Wells privately admitted to her colleagues that she had never seen raw talent of this magnitude in her 25 years of military service. That evening, Marcus received official notification of his acceptance into the Army's Special Operations Sniper School. The letter included instructions for reporting to a classified training facility where he would undergo 6 months of intensive preparation for the most demanding precision shooting missions the military conducted. As he packed his belongings for the transfer, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his life had changed since leaving Detroit. The same quiet focus and attention to detail that had made him a target for ridicule had become his greatest strengths. He thought about the people back home who had laughed at his decision to join the military, wondering what they would think if they could see him now. The irony was not lost on him. The characteristics that had made others view him as weak and unsuitable for military service were precisely what made him exceptional at the most demanding aspects of modern warfare. His journey was far from over, but Marcus was beginning to understand that he possessed something truly rare and valuable. 18 months after joining the elite sniper unit, Marcus received an assignment that would test his abilities on an international stage. The annual international military shooting competition was being held in Switzerland, bringing together the world's finest military marksmen from 37 countries. Each nation was allowed to send only their absolute best shooters, and Marcus had been selected to represent the United States alongside two veteran snipers with decades of experience. The competition was more than just a sporting event. It was a showcase of national military capabilities and a testing ground for the most advanced shooting techniques and equipment. Winners often went on to train other military units and influence the development of new sniper programs worldwide. For Marcus, it represented an opportunity to prove himself against the most skilled marksman on the planet. Staff Sergeant Jennifer Hayes, a decorated sniper with 8 years of combat experience, was selected as team leader. Master Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez, with over 300 confirmed kills and numerous commendations, rounded out the 3-person American team. Both veterans were initially skeptical about competing alongside someone so new to the profession, despite his impressive training scores. "Look, kid," Hayes said during their first team meeting, "I know you can shoot, but this competition is different. You'll be facing guys who've been doing this longer than you've been alive. Some of these shooters have been representing their countries for over a decade." Rodriguez nodded in agreement. The psychological pressure alone has broken seasoned veterans. These competitions aren't just about accuracy. They're about performing under intense scrutiny while representing your entire country. One bad day can destroy a military career. Marcus listened respectfully to their concerns while privately feeling confident in his abilities. His training had included extensive psychological conditioning, and he had consistently performed his best work under the highest pressure situations. If anything, the stakes of international competition appealed to his perfectionist nature. The team arrived in Geneva 2 weeks before the competition to acclimatize to the local conditions and familiarize themselves with the ranges. The Swiss Alps provided a stunning backdrop, but also created challenging shooting conditions with unpredictable mountain winds and rapidly changing weather patterns. Marcus spent hours studying the terrain and atmospheric conditions, taking detailed notes about wind patterns and light conditions at different times of day. During practice sessions, Marcus quietly impressed his teammates with his methodical approach and consistent performance. While other competitors engaged in elaborate warm-up routines and equipment adjustments, Marcus simply studied the conditions, made precise calculations, and delivered accurate shots with minimal fanfare. "He's different," Hayes admitted to Rodriguez after watching Marcus hit 15 consecutive bullseyes at 1,000 yards. "I've never seen anyone so calm during practice. Most shooters, especially new ones, show some nerves when they're preparing for something this big." The competition format included multiple events designed to test different aspects of precision shooting. The opening ceremony was attended by military officials from around the world, and Marcus felt the weight of representing his country as he stood with his teammates during the national anthem. Looking across at the other competitors, he saw hardened veterans with countless medals and years of international experience. The first event was long-range precision shooting, at fixed targets from 800 to 1,500 yards. Competitors had 4 hours to engage 20 targets under varying conditions, with scoring based on accuracy and consistency. Marcus watched carefully as shooters from Russia, Germany, and the United Kingdom, traditional powerhouses in military marksmanship, delivered impressive performances. When Marcus's turn came, he approached the firing line with the same calm focus he had demonstrated throughout his training. The first target, positioned at 800 yards, required careful attention to wind conditions that had been shifting throughout the morning. Marcus made minute adjustments to his scope and took his first shot. Perfect center hit. The pattern continued as Marcus worked through increasingly distant targets. His shots were so consistently accurate that range officials double-checked their equipment to ensure the scoring system was functioning properly. By the time he completed the course, Marcus had achieved something unprecedented in the competition's history: a perfect score, with every shot landing within the highest scoring ring. Competition officials announced the results with barely concealed amazement. Marcus had not only won the event, but had done so by margins that shocked experienced observers. Several veteran competitors approached him afterward, curious about his background and training methods. "Excuse me," said Captain Muller from the German team. a man whose precision shooting had dominated European competitions for nearly a decade. I have been watching your technique, and I am very impressed. You seem to have a different approach than most snipers. Would you mind sharing your background? Quote, Marcus explained his unconventional path to military marksmanship, including his academic focus and late start with firearms. Mueller listened intently, occasionally asking questions about Marcus's analytical approach to reading environmental conditions and making shooting calculations. This is very interesting, Mueller concluded. Most of us learn to shoot through military tradition and instinct. Your scientific approach is quite innovative. The second event tested moving target engagement and rapid target acquisition under time pressure. This was traditionally dominated by shooters with extensive combat experience who had developed quick reflexes and intuitive target selection abilities. Hayes and Rodriguez assumed this would be Marcus's weakness, given his limited field experience. Instead, Marcus approached the challenge with the same methodical precision he applied to everything else. He studied the target movement patterns during practice, calculated optimal shooting positions for different scenarios, and developed a systematic approach to target prioritization. When the actual event began, his performance was flawless. Target after target fell to Marcus's precisely aimed shots, even as they moved along complex paths designed to challenge the most experienced marksman. His ability to track moving targets and make instant calculations for lead and elevation impressed competitors who had spent years developing similar skills through combat experience. By the midpoint of the competition, Marcus had won every event he entered, often by significant margins. International shooting coaches were taking notes on his techniques, and several countries inquired about arranging training exchanges to learn from his methods. The quiet young man from Detroit had become the most talked-about competitor in the tournament's 40-year history. Colonel Wells, who had traveled to Switzerland to observe the competition, watched with pride as Marcus dominated events that seasoned veterans found challenging. I knew he was special, she told the assembled American delegation. But this level of performance exceeds even our highest expectations. The final event would test competitors in the most challenging conditions possible. Shots at extreme range under adverse weather conditions, with scoring based not just on accuracy but on the ability to adapt quickly to changing situations. This was where experience typically triumphed over raw talent, and where Marcus would face his greatest test yet. The final day of the International Military Shooting Competition dawned gray and windy, with Swiss meteorologists predicting challenging conditions throughout the morning. The ultimate test would be conducted at the notorious Devil's Range, a mountainside facility where crosswinds, elevation changes, and variable lighting had humbled even the most accomplished marksmen. This was where legends were made, and careers were either elevated or ended. Marcus stood at the firing line alongside 19 other finalists, each representing their nation's absolute best. To his left was Captain Petrov, from Russia's elite Spetsnaz forces, a man whose reputation for precision under combat conditions was legendary. To his right stood Sergeant Major Chen from the Chinese military, whose technical innovations in long-range shooting had revolutionized training programs throughout Asia. The final challenge was deceptively simple in concept but brutally difficult in execution. Each competitor would attempt a single shot at a target positioned 1,800 yards away, nearly a mile, under conditions that would test every aspect of their skill and mental fortitude. Wind speeds were gusting up to 30 miles per hour. The target was partially obscured by mountain terrain, and competitors had just one opportunity to prove their abilities. King Gustav of Sweden, the competition's traditional honorary observer, sat in the reviewing stand alongside military attachés from around the world. Royal protocol dictated that the king personally congratulate the winner, a tradition that added significant prestige to an already important event. Members of the Swiss Royal Guard, renowned for their own marksmanship traditions, served as range officials and technical advisors. Commander Erich Lindquist of the Swiss Royal Guard approached the firing line to explain the final challenge. His reputation as one of Europe's finest marksmen preceded him, and his presence added weight to the proceedings. Gentlemen, he announced in accented English, this shot has been attempted 847 times in the 40 years of this competition. It has been successfully completed only 23 times. The conditions today are among the most challenging we have recorded. Marcus studied the distant target through his scope, noting how the mountain winds created swirling patterns that would affect bullet trajectory in unpredictable ways. The elevation difference meant calculating a complex ballistic arc, while the partial concealment required precise shot placement within a target area smaller than a dinner plate. Most competitors were already making preliminary calculations and adjustments to their equipment. The shooting order was determined by reverse rankings from previous events, meaning Marcus would shoot last, as the current overall leader. This added psychological pressure, as he would know exactly what level of performance was required to maintain his position. One by one, the world's finest marksmen took their turn at the impossible shot. Captain Petrov, shooting first, took nearly 10 minutes to study conditions and make his calculations. His shot was expertly aimed and came remarkably close to the target center, earning respect from observers even though it missed the required scoring zone by mere inches. Similar results followed, as shooter after shooter attempted the challenge with varying degrees of success. Sergeant Major Chen achieved what many considered the shot of the day, placing his bullet within the outer scoring ring despite the challenging conditions. The Chinese delegation erupted in celebration, and Chen was congratulated by officials and competitors alike for his exceptional performance under pressure. His success set a high standard that would be difficult to exceed. As Marcus prepared for his turn, he could feel the attention of every observer focused on him. The young American had dominated every previous event, but this final challenge was different. This was where experience and intuition traditionally overcame raw talent and technical precision. The whispered conversations around the range suggested that many experts expected Marcus to finally meet his match. Commander Lindquist approached Marcus as he settled into his shooting position. "Young man," he said quietly, "I have been observing your performance throughout this competition with great interest. Your approach is unlike anything I have seen in 20 years of military marksmanship. Whatever the outcome today, you have already proven yourself exceptional." Marcus nodded respectfully but remained focused on his preparations. He spent 15 minutes studying wind patterns, taking detailed measurements of atmospheric conditions, and making complex ballistic calculations. His methodical approach contrasted sharply with the more intuitive methods employed by most of the other competitors. The range fell silent as Marcus made his final equipment adjustments and assumed his firing position. Through his scope, the distant target appeared impossibly small, wavering slightly in the variable wind conditions. He controlled his breathing, made minute adjustments for the calculated wind drift, and began the slow, steady trigger squeeze that had become his trademark. The sharp crack of the rifle shot echoed off the surrounding mountains, followed by several seconds of absolute silence as observers waited for confirmation from the downrange officials. Commander Lindquist raised his binoculars to study the target, his expression unreadable as he assessed the shot placement. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lindquist announced over the range loudspeakers, his voice carrying a tone of genuine amazement, "Sergeant Thompson has achieved a perfect center hit. This is only the second perfect score at this distance in the competition's 40-year history." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Competitors who had been rivals moments before rushed to congratulate Marcus on his achievement. King Gustav rose from his seat in the reviewing stand, clearly impressed by the display of marksmanship he had just witnessed. The Swiss Royal Guard, men whose own shooting abilities were legendary, nodded with professional respect. Commander Lindquist walked over to Marcus with an expression of professional admiration that spoke volumes about the significance of the achievement. "Sergeant Thompson," he said formally, "in my 20 years with the Royal Guard, I have never witnessed shooting of this caliber. You have not only won this competition, but you have redefined what we consider possible in precision marksmanship." The award ceremony that followed was unlike anything Marcus had imagined when he first decided to join the military. King Gustav personally presented him with the competition's highest honor, the Golden Crosshairs Award, given to the overall champion. Military leaders from around the world requested meetings to discuss training exchanges and tactical innovations based on Marcus's methods. Colonel Wells watched with pride as Marcus stood at attention while national anthems played and cameras recorded the moment for military history. The same young man who had been mocked and ridiculed for his decision to join the military had just demonstrated skills that would influence sniper training programs worldwide. During the reception that followed, Marcus found himself surrounded by some of the most respected military marksmen in the world. They peppered him with questions about his training methods, his analytical approach to shooting, and his plans for the future. Several offered positions with their respective military units, recognizing that his talents could benefit shooters from any nation. 3 weeks later, Marcus returned to Detroit on leave, wearing his dress uniform adorned with new ribbons and commendations. Word of his international success had reached his hometown through military newsletters and social media posts from the competition. He walked down the same streets where he had been mocked and ridiculed, but now he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had proven their worth on the world's largest stage. At the local convenience store where he had once worked, Marcus encountered several of the same people who had gathered to ridicule his military ambitions 2 years earlier. Jake Morrison was the first to spot him, and his reaction was markedly different from their last encounter. "Marcus?" Jake said uncertainly, clearly recognizing the uniform and the bearing of someone who had undergone significant military training. "Is that really you?" Word spread quickly through the neighborhood, just as it had when Marcus first announced his intention to enlist. But this time, people gathered to hear stories of his achievements rather than to mock his ambitions. The same crowd that had once bet on his failure now listened in amazement as Marcus humbly described his training and competition experiences. The transformation was complete. Marcus Thompson had evolved from a target of ridicule into someone whose achievements commanded respect and admiration. His journey from the bullied kid with thick glasses to an internationally recognized military marksman proved that true strength often lies hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the right circumstances to reveal itself. As he visited his grandmother's grave that evening, placing his competition medal on her headstone, Marcus reflected on how profoundly his life had changed. The quiet determination she had instilled in him had carried him through mockery, hardship, and challenges that had broken stronger men. Her lessons about perseverance and staying true to oneself had guided him to achievements that exceeded his wildest dreams. The people who had once laughed in his face now spoke of him with pride, claiming connection to someone who had brought honor to their community. Marcus accepted their changed attitudes graciously, understanding that respect earned through achievement was far more valuable than any revenge could ever be. His deadly aim had indeed shocked them all, but more importantly, it had proven that true strength comes from within and emerges when others least expect it.